say hi and welcome to all of the guests here today. A bunch of folks have filtered in, but great attendance. Feel free to turn on your video and wave hello. It's always nice to see who's here. And you can also say in the chat, just introduce yourself, let us know where you're tuning in from. It's always really cool to see the range of participation. We'll get started in just a moment. My name is Ryan. I'm on the BotanicWise team with Abby and Karis, working together for the upcoming program with Christopher Hobbs and some amazing guest presenters. And so in this event, using mushrooms with confidence, this is a slightly more informal presentation, as you might have guessed from previous and other webinars. We'll be going until 8 p.m. Eastern and then having a little after party. So you'll be able to do some breakout groups and meet people if you want to stick around after the conversation that we're going to have. And we have Christopher Hobbs here to talk about using mushrooms with confidence, sourcing mushrooms, making medicine at home, kind of getting started. And we also have a couple of the guest presenters who will be presenting in the program to pop in and say hi. And we'd love to tell you a little bit more about who they are. And so, Karis, would you like to take it from here? Everybody, this is Karis Lindruth.
Hey, everybody. I'm so glad that you're all here. I'm really excited that we have two special guests who are guest presenters in Christopher Hobbs' new program. I want to apologize in advance if I'm a little glitchy. My internet is cranky today, which you know happens to anybody. I had really good luck lately, but tonight that's just the way it is. It's hot and humid out. Maybe it's always the weather, right? But I am looking out my window here, and there's a beautiful indigo bunting right. My sort of signature bird this summer. He sings to me every morning. I hear him waking me up at the very first dawn. So even if I don't have great internet, at least I've got an indigo bunting. So I want to introduce our featured presenter, Christopher Hobbs. But before I do that, I'm going to mention our two sort of guest cameos who we're going to speak to before Christopher really dives into his information so that they can stay or leave as they wish. The first is Dr. Elsa Valenga, who is a mycologist. I believe she began her studies in the Netherlands and is now in California. And her studies really focus on taxonomy and systematics of mushrooms. And I'm really excited to announce that she is doing like a Get Us Excited for the Program class live tomorrow for the participants who are you want to share a little bit about what you're going to speak about tomorrow, Elsa?
Yeah, tomorrow I will be giving a kind of basic introduction to mushrooms, what they are, what they do, how important they are in the environment, and then because of their importance in the environment, about conservation efforts and what we all can do to contribute to those efforts. That's, in a very short nutshell, what I'm talking about tomorrow.
I'm really looking forward to this class because for me, I'm a fair beginner in the world of mushrooms. So I'm looking forward to kind of digging in at the beginning of where I should be starting instead of just what they do, but more about what they are. So thank you, Elsa. And we're going to be chatting with you in just a few minutes too. And then we have Giuliana Ferci, who I met last year at Allies for Plants and People, a BotanicWise conference. And she is my long lost sister. I just love her. I love her passion for fungi. Yes, thank you. And she hails to us from Chile, where she fell in love. Well, she really feels a need for, something's happening. Yes, okay. Gotta get some weird internet tonight. Giuliana fills a niche studying mushrooms specific to Chile. And I think that before she really decided her career, she discovered that there was a need for somebody to classify and study the Chilean mushroom. Am I right? Am I right about that?
I followed in the steps of some pretty cool people, and I've really gone down the conservation route more than sort of the policy route, what nobody else wants to do. That's where I've been for a while.
Yeah, so she's the founder of the Fungi Foundation. Do you want to say a little bit about the work that you're doing with
Sure.
the foundation?
So, thank you, Karis. And it's a pleasure to be here, I have to say that. And a big hug to you and your daughter as well. The Fungi Foundation is the first NGO dedicated to fungi 24/7, I have to say. We last year opened in the US, so we have an office in Chile and one in New York, and we work globally to red list fungi, to bring fungi into conservation frameworks on an international level. And we also have a strong education program and expeditions. We like to go to places where nobody's ever been before to look for fungi. Yeah.
And we're all going to take a class trip with her.
Yeah.
And then we have our featured speaker, who is the founder of the new program, Medicinal Mushrooms, and also the author of his new book, Medicinal Mushrooms, The Essential Guide, which has just recently hit the bookstores. And that's Christopher Hobbs. And Christopher is a fourth generation herbalist. He's taught all over the world. He has his PhD in biology, biography, phylogenetics, plant chemistry, and ethnobotany. And he applies that same scientific rigor to his study of mushrooms. But he also brings with it, I would say, a passion and a joy, both for fungi and also for people. And he loves bringing those two together and teaching about them. So welcome, Christopher. It's nice to have you join us again. We're always happy to have you here with us.
Thanks, Karis. Thanks. And it's just so wonderful. I see the kitty there. Somebody's got a kitty with a hat on. My son just got 2 kitties. So we've got kitties in our house now. And for the first time, and that's been kind of fun. They kind of race around the house, tearing it up. But other than that, they are adorable, and my son's really loving them. So that's good. He's 19, by the way. Yeah. So it's quite a large topic. It's a whole kingdom. In fact, it's a whole kingdom of organisms that are very integral to our experience here on planet Earth. And if you've read a book, and I would certainly highly recommend it, and that is Merlin Sheldrake's book, Entangled Life. So if you're interested in finding out more about how key fungi are to our environment and how they connect many different types of organisms in the plant kingdom together, and certainly with us, then please do check out Merlin's book. It's really an eye-opener, and he tells lots of stories, and he reads it. So if you're lazy and you're reading too much already and want to listen to it, then Audible has a copy of it with him reading it. So that's highly recommended reading to find out more about fungi and their importance. So our focus mainly is not so much conservation, or my focus isn't, though that I'm so glad Elsa is here to talk more about that. It's such an important part of getting to know fungi. Certainly, we're going to talk more about the human fungi interaction as far as health, promoting health, and for use as medicines, which fungi have been used all over the world in many cultures for medicine for 2,000 or 3,000 years, no doubt. Though I will say too that if you look in Western culture, they, especially like in Italy, they love fungi now. They love hunting them and eating them and studying them. But back 2,000 years ago, when the Romans and the Greeks were in the ascendant, they had quite a suspicion for fungi because of the lethal ones, such as Amanita phalloides. And it turns out that, I don't know if you ever saw I, Claudius. Did any of you ever watch that with Derek Jacobi? Fantastic show. But in those days, the royal family and so forth were poisoning each other off quite frequently with fungi. So the Romans and Greeks had kind of a high suspicion about them and only ate a few, and because they were afraid of getting poisoned. And actually, Nero would have tasters and so forth to taste the dishes first. Of course, sometimes the death is delayed or the toxicity is delayed. So I'm not sure how that would work, but anyway, it's that kind of went over maybe into Western Europe, having some fungophobia to a certain extent. But now I think that's opened up so much, and the passion and love for fungi, I think it has really just spread around the globe as far as looking for them, adding them to our cuisine, just their delightful appearance, the colors, the smells. And I wonder how many of you actually go out into the woods or the fields and look for wild mushrooms and try to identify them, and maybe comment in the chat if you're really passionate about getting out there and looking for fungi in the woods and forests. And there's so much benefit for going out there and making a closer connection with them in many, many different ways. But of course, the Japanese idea of forest therapy, and it's also quite well known in Europe as well, forest therapy of just getting out in the woods and inhaling all of those incredible volatiles that plants and trees emit. It's really tons that they're putting out in the atmosphere. And so when you walk in the forest and you hear the wind in the trees, and that's kind of a sound therapy, especially when there aren't big trucks going by, if you're up in the wilderness. And that's so calming and so invigorating and healing. But then the aroma of the forest is just phenomenal. It really does pick up your spirits. There are clinical studies on some of these volatiles, which are monoterpenes and some sesquiterpenes. And there is human research showing that it can really pick up our mood and counteract depression, for instance. So there's that aspect of it. But then when you start looking at all the incredible variety and colors and shapes of wild mushrooms and also polypores on the logs, then I think you're going to get excited if you haven't been out there and you're not used to being out in the woods. Maybe some of you are in the city and you don't get out into the forest and the fields too much. So in that case, there are many ways to cultivate mushrooms, and you can very easily grow your own. All you need is some straw and a pressure cooker and some poly bags, and you can grow literally and spawn. You can buy that easily on the web. So you can very easily grow your own. And that includes reishi, which I've got. I always have reishi fruiting bodies sitting around my desk and even next to my bed. I don't know why, but I just like having them around. They do last a long time. I think this one I've had for about 5 years. It hasn't really changed much. So sometimes the fly larvae get in here and degrade them, but this one is pretty stable. So these are ones that are used for medicine. Here we are we're going to have a dance party.
Yeah.
Don't forget to mute your audio if you've got some music playing in the background.
All right.
Thank you. So anyway, just going over how fantastic fungi are in many ways, and I'm not talking about any specific about how to brew them up or drink them. That's all going to be covered in the course, and we can take as many questions as you want, and it's all highly detailed in my book here too, how to grow them, how to use them, including psilocybin and just about any other group of edible useful mushrooms that you can that are popular anyway. I didn't cover all the minor ones, but many, many different genera and species. So I'll leave it maybe to Ryan here to direct the questions, and maybe Elsa wants to talk more, or.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Christopher. And it would be cool to hear from everybody in the chat, like, where are you on your journey of mushrooms? Are you just getting inspired and interested in it now? You know, are you currently using them, or maybe you're a professional who uses mushrooms with, you know, clinical work? So let us know in the chat, just kind of like beginner, intermediate, advanced. Just be really cool to see who all is here. And then the question that we want to kind of do like panel style and really hear from Giuliana and Elsa is, and Christopher, you just spoke to this a little bit, but for Giuliana and Elsa, like, why you've dedicated your lives to mushrooms and fungi, and what is it that you like that really hooked you, and why is it so significant and empowering? You know, like when you see people light up and you see the way that it can change people's lives. Yeah, can you speak to that a little bit? It's really fascinating.
Elsa, please.
I was going to say Giuliana. I think for me, it is that you never know what you will find in the woods. You never know beforehand what you will find. You don't know what it is. That's hooked me. And then the other thing which really hooks me still, that we know so incredibly little about mushrooms. You know, about a plant, we know how long it will take from seedling to a full-grown tree, for instance. We have no idea for fungi of any of those. And that is just one little part of their life cycle. We have no idea about how long does it take from a spore till it can fruit for each species. We know it for those things we grow on compost, like button mushrooms, but we have no idea. So I feel that I'm still a beginner in mushrooms. So when I look back to my life and think, oh my gosh, I started looking at mushrooms 40 years ago, but I still don't, I feel that there's so much still to know. I mean, here in California where I live, there's so many species that don't have a name. They don't have a name. So they don't count when we don't have a name for something. It's nothing. So for me, going back to what I'm focusing on mostly in my life is being taxonomy. So looking at mushrooms and how do they differ from each other and what are their names. That is the basic part that we do. If we don't have a name, we can't do anything else with them, and we can't do conservation efforts anyway either. So for me, taxonomy, what I do is the basis for other research, and especially for conservation venues. And now it's up to Giuliana.
Oh, thank you, Elsa. And now with the broader group here, I have to say I'm your groupie. Saying it again, I'll never stop saying it. Total fan. What gets, you know, for me, there are a lot of questions. I think what Elsa's saying, first of all, is absolutely like enticing, is that you have to coincide with the macroscopic manifestation of an organism that lives invisibly, and that maybe for a few days a year, maybe it's every 10 years, maybe it's every 20 years, it's visible, and you can, and then you have to coincide. You have to be in the same place at the same time to be able to, and be looking in the right direction to coincide and to acknowledge each other. But what's really interesting for me about the fungi is how they question the limit of an individuality, because they're organisms that can't live separate from another. So they're either, you know, they're symbionts or decomposers. There's always a symbiosis. There's always a very visible relationship with another organism, and it's visible because fungi live inside their substrate, right, inside their food source mostly, and it really shows you that an individual doesn't exist, that you don't exist separate from another. and I think that's something that we can learn from. And then the third thing I would say that has me completely in love, I fall in love with them every day, is how they can also position you to question where, what life cycles look like when you stand from when decomposition begins. So most people think that rotting or decomposition is the end of a life form, but really, if you're a mycologist, it's the beginning of a life form. And standing there and looking at life cycles like that really changes your perspective. And so I always think about maybe even an old tree, from my point of view, the most glorious moment of an old tree is when it falls to the ground and starts decomposing and goes back to soil. For others, it might be when it's sprouting and it's seeds germinating, but fungi position you in different parts of a life cycle to look at life and death. Yeah.
Moment of silence is appropriate.
Okay, it's not the connection. All right.
You're bringing up such
very much.
huge themes. And so, Christopher, since you're talking primarily about medicinal mushrooms in your program and healing, can you speak to how that ties in? We're talking about like the whole life cycle. We're talking about interconnectivity, where nothing can really be separate in this way. And where does this start to overlap into the realm of medicine, in your view?
Well, certainly being connected to the world around us in a number of ways is where our health comes from. That's how we maintain our health, by a connection with the world that's around us. The organisms, and we're so much composed of other organisms. Like we have all kinds of resident viruses inside of us, bacteria, and of course fungi and yeast, which are single-celled fungi. So all of these are connecting us to our environment in a way. And as Giuliana said, it's so important to remember that we're not separate organisms. It's all one. It's all one. You could look at the whole Earth as one unified organism with many different parts, and we are one part only. But so many other parts are interconnected. And when we realize it, and when we are connected, then our health and certainly balance in our world is going to be much greater. Our psychology even. And of course, you probably know that there's a lot of research on probiotics and our resonant microbiota, our microflora in our gut. But don't forget that our skin has tons of microbes embedded in our dermis. So we have microbes in our dermis. They're inside of our eyebrows. They're just about every part of our body is connected and has microbes in there. And it's another really interesting thing that you may not be aware of are the endophytes in plants. So every plant out there also has probiotics, has a microbiota of their own. And so they're not only attached to the roots and in the soil, and they're interconnected that way, but also their leaves are full of fungi. And so these are, and probably bacteria too, but there is a resident fungal microflora inside plant leaves and tree leaves, and almost every plant species has them. And we're just really starting to explore those. So just to say that, our own health is really dependent on, certainly my experience, is really being connected to our environment in many, many different ways, and knowing that. But when it comes down to like ingesting mushrooms and thinking about mushrooms as specific medicines, we have to bring in the piece that medicine and food are not separate. So this is a very important concept in health in general, is that we shouldn't. I think the drug companies have pre-opted the word medicine so that we think of it as a pill. But medicine is really so much more than that. So it's a kiss, it's a touch, it's an embrace, but it's also all of the food that we eat. Think about how much food that we eat. And when we incorporate fungi in our diet and we think of it as food, and not just, okay, I'm interested in reishi. I want to find out more about reishi and how it can work as a medicine. That's fine, but reishi is best ingested as food by cooking and grinding up the whole fruiting body. So that's one of the things that we'll explore in detail in the class, is that when you think about using mushrooms, think about the whole fruiting body, using them. And of course, we use mycelium too. Think about tempeh and so many other foods that are traditionally cultured. Those are full of mushroom mycelium. So eating them, we're getting the beta glucans, we're getting the chitin, we're getting the immunomodulating compounds, which are so potent as immunomodulators and protectors, and very ancient connection with those for modulating our immunity and protecting us against more virulent pathogens like COVID, of course. So if we cook with mushrooms and we think of them as food and medicine both, and don't think about them as separate, or think about, okay, what pills can I take, or even powders, but think about cooking up the whole mushroom, and think about eating the mycelium in tempeh, for instance, and ingesting those. And so we're going to get a lot of healing medicine by eating them. And and what I mentioned is that for reishi, you might think of boiling it and then drinking the tea, but much better is to pressure cook it, or just cook it for 2 or 3 hours, and then grind up the whole fruiting body. Even if it is hard, it's going to soften up. This one is not organic, but if you can get, I've got organically grown reishi here that are much more tender. These are easy to grow at home, and then you can cook these and just grind them up and eat the whole fruiting body, and that's going to give you so much more medicine. So we're going to go into that. We're going to go into this of how many ways that mushrooms can support our body, support our health through its incredible vitamin and mineral content and amazing amount of fiber. We all need much more fiber in our diet, and I just love thinking about that, because the average person for instance, in the US only gets around 15 grams of fiber in their diet daily, whereas if you're follow the government guidelines, they say 25 grams, and a traditional culture, people in a traditional culture will get more like 40 or 50 or even 60 grams of fiber in their diet. So by adding mushrooms, whole mushrooms and fruiting bodies to our diet, we're going to double or triple the amount of fiber that we get in our diet. And this is incredible medicine. This is going to prevent cardiovascular disease, cancer, and many more chronic illnesses. So I think if you talk about mushrooms for medicine, you can't not talk about mushrooms for food. Going out in the woods, picking porcini, cooking them, eating them. There's so much medicine in that from start to finish. From studying them, feeding our minds on all these beautiful relationships and shapes and colors, and then going out in the forest and hunting for them, looking for them, harvesting them, learn how to cook with them, all of that, and then the flavors and tastes and the delight and enjoyment of going out with your family and friends. So there's so much medicine in the whole process, is my point. I wouldn't, to think about mushrooms as just capsules, that's really, not what the real medicine is. It's the whole process, really.
Hearing you talk about it and also just talking about the big picture of fungi in general, it's hard to imagine and explain for myself all the years that mushrooms haven't been a part of my life. I feel like I'm kind of just waking up to them, in a way. Last year I took your class, Giuliana, and at Allies for Plants and People, and was really inspired. And so I've been kind of in that inspired place for the last year. And then about a month ago, when I got your book, Christopher, I started getting really inspired about making medicine. And so I think there's a lot of people who are sort of saying that in the chat too, just kind of getting inspired about it and wanting to learn to make this a bigger part of their lives. So we're certainly excited about the program. I want to thank our guest teachers, Giuliana and Elsa, for popping in and saying hello. Just want to say thank you. I know, Giuliana, you're gonna head out a little bit early. So is there anything else that you want to say about what you're excited about for the upcoming program in the community?
Yes, I thank you, Ryan. I want to, well, I don't know if I want to say about talk about the upcoming program, but I do want to talk about and say to everybody, you know, that the important thing in my view about looking when you're starting to get hyped on mushrooms is to really embrace the fact that you know, have depended on yeast for so long. If you're into fermentation, it's all about fungi. You know, if you're you know, if you're into lichens and dyeing, you know, wools and fibers, there's a lot, you know, fungi are part of, are studied within the lichens are studied within the fungi too, you know, so it's important to always, as you said, Ryan, it's mushrooms and the fungi, the broader fungi. The mushrooms are just a part. So when we're talking about mushrooms, it's like talking about birds, and then when we talk about fungi, it's like talking about animals. So you might feel that you don't know much about mushrooms, but if you know a lot about fermenting and yeast and you know sourdough, then you know about fungi. So you know, give yourselves the space to think broadly about that. And for the upcoming program, I have to say, please don't miss Elsa's class tomorrow. Like, I didn't know that class was going on and I wouldn't miss it. It's she, you know, #1. And we will be seeing each other, hopefully to inspire many more people. And I want to say thank you to everybody who continued using the methodology that I taught in the previous class, and that have continued to collect and know how to voucher specimens to make their encounter matter. And I want to invite you all to go onto the Fungi Foundation page. It's F Fungi, and there's a tab in what we do, and there's a campaign called What You See Matters, and there you can find some videos and templates on what to do when you see when you coincide with a fungus. And never forget that what you see matters, because not necessarily anybody else has seen that species. So that's what I want to say, and say thank you very much. And congratulations to Christopher. I can't wait to see your book. Still not here in Chile, but hopefully it will be soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Giuliana.
Okay, well, Elsa, is there anything you wanna add before we move on?
It's hard to say things as eloquent as Giuliana can do. So I would say the same thing as Giuliana. I hope when you go out and see a mushroom, well, even if you see it just in your backyard, observe it and share your observations with other people on the various platforms that are available, because every data point is really important. You count, but the mushrooms count as well. And mushrooms, as we keep saying, or fungi, are so important in the natural world, and they have always got too much bad press, I'm afraid. But fungi need good lawyers, and I hope we are being that. And I hope to inspire you to be good lawyers of fungi and the world in general. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the coming week. I mean, tomorrow at least.
Can you mention a couple of those platforms, Elsa?
Yes, that is iNaturalist.org is one for every organism you encounter. You can post photos or sounds. That's a very good way to start. And the other one is mushroomobserver.org. That is specifically for mushrooms. But iNaturalist is a very easy one to use. It has an app for mobile phones. So that's what I would recommend. And even, you can post there any organism you come across, not just fungi. And which is important because fungi are part of the whole world and they're all interconnected. And I'll stress that tomorrow as well. I mean, I call it the fungal world we live in, but being a little biased, but still.
And there are so many species that we don't know.
There are millions. I mean, the estimates now for fungi is something like between 10 and 12 million species, I think, and that's just mind-boggling. I mean, plants, we are still something like 400,000, I think.
Yeah.
And, fungi are not as visible, but they are way more numerous in number of species.
Well, there's so many in the soil, aren't there?
Yes.
So many species in the soil that we're identifying now.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm hearing and that it feels inspiring to me, and let us know in the chat, is just the curiosity about fungi and the way that just even the curiosity and the experience can be healing. And Christopher was talking about that healing connection of being in the forest. And I appreciate what you're saying about maybe nobody else has seen that before, because my assumption is always, oh, I'm not, everybody else knows more than me, so blah, 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 blah. So I just want to thank you so much for reinvigorating some curiosity in me and remembering, not taking any moment for granted, remembering that every experience is unique. So thank you. That feels powerful, and I'm going to remember that.
That curiosity, I think that's what keeps us all going.
Yeah.
So just
It's
keep
medicine, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really
Life
true.
itself is curious. Curious and careful, right? Okay, thank you. So one of the things that we want to do is open up some questions for the audience to chat about medicinal mushrooms, questions that you have. At the last webinar, Christopher showed us a way of determining the quality of medicine. So being able to do like a starch test. And I'm not sure if you want to repeat that or not. We don't have very much time left. So I feel like we should do some questions, but we can definitely share a video clip of this and, about how you can test mushroom products, because one of the reasons that, your book is so important and your class is so important is for helping people understand how to not be fooled by some of the commercial products that are kind of riding the new, there's always a new fad, right? But just riding whatever commercialized version of medicinal mushrooms there is out there. But we want to make sure everybody understands that there is a program starting on Monday for people that want to study medicinal mushrooms, that want to have access to a community of students, a table of contents of classes and presentations and materials, and 6 weeks of live programs to kick the entire thing off. So that's starting on Monday. And you probably have a link by now because it's enrollment week right now, and Karis has been sending some really good emails about it. But Christopher, I want to turn this over for you and ask you to speak on the value and the promise of learning how to engage with medicinal mushrooms.
Well, I think Elsa, or was it Giuliani, that said that it's really nice if you have mushrooms coming up in your yard to take a closer look. And they come up everywhere. So when you see them come up, or when you're in a walk in the woods or the fields, it is nice to look at them and just smell them. Smell one, usually on the top and not where the gills are. You might snap up some spores. but they all have an odor, and some of them are very fruity. So just engage in a way in your senses. I think it's very good to engage with them and just take a closer look, or get a block. You can buy blocks from a number of vendors where you can grow your own oyster mushrooms or shiitakes. That's a really good way, or even grow them from scratch. I tell how to do that in my book. So grow them, and of course we eat the button mushroom and have for a long time, and portobellos and crimines, but there's so much more, and those are really one of the least medicinal of all mushrooms, are the button mushrooms. And certainly there are some better tasting ones as well, like shiitake, which is the second most commonly cultivated mushroom in the world after button mushrooms. But those are absolutely delicious, and they have a wonderful mouthfeel and flavor. So eat them, grow them, look at them and study them, and engage with them wherever you see them is a good way to start. Certainly, there are many books out there. There are many field guides. I would recommend David Aurora's book. Certainly, All That Rain Promises and More is a fantastic little field guide to have that has all the common edibles and toxic ones. So just dive in. And if you go to the store, see what other species they have. They might have lion's mane, they might have maitake. Certainly they're going to have, many will have shiitake and oyster mushrooms. These are some of the, and enoki maybe. These are some of the most common edible mushrooms, which are all medicinal. So any ones that you eat, any ones that you get to know, and you like the flavor of, you like the texture, start eating them more regularly and see how it feels. They all have immunomodulating and boosting properties, and they're all nutritional powerhouses and have tons of fiber. So, and if you follow the research, there's a new book, a new edition of the China study, fantastic book that is one of the best health books I've ever read, the China study. And his premise is basically that so many clinical studies and so much research show that a plant-based diet is going to help us live longer, healthier lives, and reduce the amount of chronic illness. So switching from meat over to, a lot of meat over to mostly a plant-based diet, I think is universally recognized as a way to maintain our health, to live longer, happier, healthier lives. And it's also easier on the environment. And mushrooms play a huge role in that transition. If you're maybe wanting to move over to more plant-based diets, mushrooms are kind of, and interestingly, in the phylogeny, in the tree of life, mushrooms are kind of halfway between plants and animals. So we divided, and mushrooms actually divided not as long ago as plants did from animals. So mushrooms are a very good food in general to eat, but also if you want to transition from meat products, maybe in some meals, to a more plant-based diet. And I include in plant-based diet, even though mushrooms are not in the plant kingdom, they still are more, they're healthier. They have a lot of fiber. And again, I use fiber as a marker for health, for a healthy aspect of foods. And don't forget that eggs, meat, and dairy have zero fiber. So that's a big problem. And that's why those foods are best eaten sparingly if we want to have the longest, healthiest life that we can. So mushrooms are very high in protein, B vitamins, minerals, many of the same aspects that meat has. Mushrooms also provide, or can provide, and the mouthfeel, the flavor, the texture is often a little bit meat-like and not exactly like vegetables. So they make a good, perfect bridge from meat over to more vegetable-based diet and a healthier diet. So that's just one aspect, but again, they have a lot of other compounds in their cell wall that are immunomodulating that can really protect you against infections. And I think that's one reason why most of the fungal growers of fungi that I know now recently have seen their sales double and triple in their company, like growers, manufacturers, because so many people are concerned about protecting themselves from viruses and other pathogens. And mushrooms are the absolute perfect medicine and food to protect ourselves against becoming infected by pathogens. And using them regularly is the best way and the most effective way to really protect ourselves during cold and flu season. I use reishi extensively and other species during the cold and flu season, and rarely do get sick these days because I always incorporate reishi and other mushrooms. So there are many aspects to it that we will talk about in greater detail in the class, and I'm just so happy to have Elsa and Giuliana doing classes and presenting their life's work, basically, and their passion and joy in engaging and learning more about mushrooms and sharing all that with you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Christopher. So I wanted to ask you to share sort of why you put together the 6 lessons that you did in the program and how it's structured. And we have a couple other questions. And so we're going to go and have some social time and dig into some questions pretty soon as well. So, so Christopher, we've got 6 lessons starting Monday. The introduction, you just talked about a little bit, but going into it, you have reishi, lion's mane, mushroom making for home and clinic, psilocybin, and cooking with medicinal mushrooms. And a final wrap up and Q&A. Why, can you speak to sort of how you chose this structure for the curriculum and why you go so deep into specific varieties like reishi?
Well, yes, these are different species. Certainly, I like to keep I think it's important to have the practical aspects of how to incorporate mushrooms in our daily lives, in our daily regime, cooking with them, making medicine. So we really emphasize that up front. Medicine making is so important, making your own. There are a lot of products out there on the market that you can find in capsule form, powder form, other forms. But so you want to be able to test those at home with the starch test to make sure that they have all of the active beta glucans, phenolics, and terpenes that promote health. So we're going to really talk about how to make your own medicine at home. It's so easy. All you need is really a blender and a pot, and you can, and a food dehydrator helps, but you can use an oven. You can make all of your own instant mushroom powders at home, save a lot of money, and then incorporate them in soups and foods, and just making an instant tea as well. So, and it's also very satisfying and part of the medicine to take care of ourselves, to actually take the time, maybe the hour, to make our own medicine, our own mushroom powders. So I'm going to emphasize that right away, and other practical matters like all the wonderful nutrition that you can get from mushrooms. But as far as the individual species, I really pick reishi because reishi is probably the most important and popular of all medicinal mushrooms. It's been used for 2,000 years at least. It's been revered for a long time, and it has such a wide range of benefits, such as helping with sleeping problems, calming the nervous system and the spirit, and also for respiratory tract conditions like colds and flus, and even chronic respiratory tract conditions. It's used by many practitioners all over the world, and they're easy to find in the wild, and we can maybe make our own. But there are a lot of reishi products out there. So I'm going to focus on reishi and talk about its amazing range of benefits. And lion's mane is very popular now. for for regulating our mood, lifting our mood, for instance, and also for protecting and helping our nervous system. So there's a lot of research on lion's mane in that regard. Chaga is another mushroom species that's fascinating and lately has become very popular for preventing cancer or protecting the GI, our gut and digestion. And it's fantastically popular now all over Europe, certainly in Asia, but more and more in this country as well. And then there are a number of other species that we'll focus on, like shiitake, turkey tail, and some of the real superstar mushrooms that have a lot of benefits and that you can readily find out in natural food stores. The psilocybin, we're going to talk about the current research, which is just really exploding out there for regulating our mood, maybe microdosing psilocybin. I'm going to go into that in some detail. And also the clinics and the guides that are being trained all over the country for psychotherapists that want to incorporate psilocybin and other hallucinogens into their work and into the medicine for really helping us open to early childhood trauma, to help us heal depression, anxiety, other mood disorders. Psilocybin is right on the verge now of being decriminalized in California, which it already has been in Oregon and in a couple of California cities along with Denver. So this is just opening up tremendously now, and there's so much excitement because, as you may know, SSRIs and serotonin reuptake inhibitors, benzodiazepines are really only marginally effective and also have a lot of side effects. So even psychiatry, they're just so excited about psilocybin and other hallucinogenic substances for their healing potential for mood disorders, psychiatric disorders, and even as using personally for just picking up our mood in general, maybe tweaking our creativity. And now we're finding out that psilocybin can increase the growth and connectivity of neurological cells and networks in our brain. So many new studies are coming on board about this, and this is pretty exciting because as we get older, our mind, our memory, the potential of dementia, of even mild dementia, is very real as we get over 60 or 70. And psilocybin may be an amazing way to counteract that potential of a declining memory and mood as we get older. So there's so many wonderful aspects and so many exciting aspects to mushrooms as medicine that we will delve into, and then we're going to make it very, very practical as well.
Thank you so much. And so we're going to open it up to questions in just a moment. And before we do, we just want to make sure that everybody knows that just for the people on the webinar is a $50 coupon for the program. So you can enter it. I'm just going to drop it in the chat, and then we're going to get into our questions. So I know we have some folks here as well who are students who are planning on joining the program. So we're really excited to have you here just to, say hi and hang out with you. This is a community-based class. And so it's, of course, 6 weeks long with live sessions, 2 sessions a week with guest presenters and then the core curriculum. But the access to the materials, the table of contents, everything is far beyond 6 weeks. And you'll be learning with other people who are also on the mushroom path. And so you get the events calendar, but you also get a list of members. You get an activity feed. You can chat and respond. So there's already over 100 people in there, introducing themselves and connecting at the moment. So we're just so excited to put you in an environment with the teachers online so that you're not just watching videos by yourself, and you actually have a way to really process the information, and it gives BotanicWise a way to update things and keep things coming.
I also wanted to really emphasize the fact that I'm going to demonstrate cooking with mushrooms. I'm going to demonstrate medicine making and some identification features. Maybe Elsa will also show some specimens and talk about identification. So it's really going to be practical. And I want to emphasize that it's not just going to be people talking. We're going to have discussions, but there will also be lots of live mushrooms to look at. I've got boxes and boxes of dried ones that I use for my talks, but also fresh mushrooms. I'm going to talk about how to prepare them and how to cook them and use them for medicine.
Great. So are you ready, Chris, for some questions?
Yes.
All right.
I never heard a question I didn't like.
So one question is about, what's a good way to store or take care of a decoction?
If you make a decoction, for instance, if you take a reishi like this and you pressure cook it or just boil it for an hour and then grind it up, and you have the whole mushroom decoction. Decoction simply means you're boiling and breaking down the mushroom to make the active compounds more bioavailable to our body, and also release the fiber so that we can use the fiber for our health as well. How do you preserve those? The best way that I like to do it is to dry them and make a mushroom tea powder, so that you can make a tea powder concentrate. And so I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. It's also in my book, Step by Step, with pictures. Another way is to make a tincture, and another way is to make a decoction. If you don't want all the fiber, you just want the lower molecular weight compounds, then you could press it out and you can get the liquid and simmer it down and add 25% ethanol to preserve it. So any decoction you can keep for a long period of time as long as you add 25% ethanol to the decoction. You can also make a double extract by boiling the mushroom, then pressing it out, taking the liquid and setting it aside, and then tincturing the mushroom that you decocted. And then at the end of that, you add the two together. That will preserve it for a long time. You could also just take some shiitakes and blend them up, cook them and blend them up. You don't have to cook them very long, just cook them for 5 minutes and then let it cool down, blend them up and add 25% again ethanol to preserve it. Or if you wanted to not use alcohol, then you can just add a teaspoon of vitamin C powder to your shiitake slurry or decoction and then keep it in the refrigerator. And that the vitamin C and cooking should preserve it in the refrigerator for probably a month or two before it starts fermenting. So there are a number of different ways to preserve them long term. But to me, the powders are really the best because those will be preserved for up to 3 years. And it's very easy to use. You simply take a half teaspoon and mix it in hot water and drink it, or add it to a smoothie.
So I had a smoothie today or yesterday. I made it again today. That was just like a banana and hemp milk and cinnamon and cordyceps powder, and it was so good. And and a little bit of chaga as well, and chai spices.
Way to do it.
It's really good. Okay, great. Another question was about, do you know of any medicinal mushrooms that are helpful for helping with healing from surgeries, like a back surgery recovery or a prior brain surgery?
Well, yes. Any of the major medicinal species contain beta-glucans, which activate our immune responses to help heal. So medicinal mushrooms can reduce inflammation. They're not real truly stimulants in the sense that they're just going to whip your body's immune responses to a higher level. They lower some, like inflammation. If there's too much inflammation, it might lower the inflammatory process, so there's not too much. And it could increase other aspects of the immune system, which can help heal wounds. So in my, for me, if I were to have a surgery, I would definitely be taking reishi, for instance, or turkey tail, which have a lot of immunomodulating activity. And I think that's going to help. Now, reishi is also a blood mover, so it can actually stimulate blood flowing around the wound, and it can help bring resources in to help heal the wound and also carry away dead cells and weakened cells. So I think reishi is one of the best mushrooms for around surgeries, especially after, to help heal.
Great, thank you. Another quick question, and then we're going to do a more social exercise. Well, maybe there's two questions in this category. What do you think about freeze-dried mushrooms?
Yes, they have to be cooked first, though.
Okay.
Freeze-drying mushrooms is great.
And that leads well into the next question, which is about, cooked and uncooked. I think the question is, I understand it isn't healthy to eat shiitakes unless well cooked. I'm curious why. That's from Lee. Thanks, Lee. Pretty
much all mushrooms should be cooked first, as a general rule, and that's because they contain a lot of a type of polymer called chitin, which is the same tough polymer that's found in crab shells. Very tough, hard to digest. So you want to break that down, and you want to expose the beta-glucans. You want to release the antioxidant compounds. You want to release the nutrition. If you eat a lot of raw shiitake, it would probably upset your stomach because it's hard for us to digest until it's cooked. So that's the main reason to cook mushrooms. It's just that it's very, very difficult to digest unless they are cooked.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see, another question here, I think, and then we'll shift into this, is any mushrooms to assist in recovery from tick-borne disease, and specifically babiosis.
Yes, again, the mushrooms that are highest in beta-glucan, which are the immunomodulating compounds, the main ones. The mushrooms that are highest in beta-glucans are reishi and turkey tail. So those would be the ones to take to prevent serious illness from any type of pathogen, whether it be tick-borne, whether it be viruses, bacteria. Say you eat a food that has some bad bacteria in it. Just think about reishi and turkey tail, which are the very, very high in these immunomodulating beta-glucans.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can speak to this, but it's like one of the things that's interesting about focusing on strengthening the immune system is that it kind of has this underlying trust in your body when it has the right support. That's something that I hear a lot in the herbalist, when we're talking about plant medicine in general, but it keeps coming up with medicinal mushrooms. What's unique about mushrooms, compared to more like herbal plant remedies when it comes to immune system support?
Well, mushrooms are going to be more powerful and more broad spectrum than plants are. There are some very good immunomodulators in plants, like astragalus, for instance, is very good and has been used for centuries and centuries as immunostrengthening and immunomodulation. Echinacea can be good to activate your immune responses against, say, if you get a cut, or if you, or a bite or a sting, and there's bacteria getting in there. Echinacea can be very, very good for that, for stimulating the local immunity to go and help kill those pathogens coming in and prevent a more serious infection. So there are many plants that are very good immunomodulators, but none of them have the power and the breadth that mushrooms do. And certainly not as much research. There's so much more research on how mushrooms can strengthen your immune system and modulate your T cells, say the memory cells, so you can remember a particular pathogen or cancer cell, T cells and B cells that produce antibodies. You can help your body produce more antibodies to a pathogen. And it has just so many aspects to the immunomodulation. So mushrooms I think, have a more broad spectrum and more powerful effect on our immune system, and certainly a lot more clinical and laboratory research on how mushrooms work in our body. There just isn't anything comparable, either in a corporate medicine or the pharmaceutical world, or even in the plant world. I think there are many good immunomodulators, but not nearly as well studied and utilized as mushrooms.
Thank you. All right, so thanks everyone who asked questions, and we may have time to get into some more. And who would like to participate in a little after party and meet some people? I also want to say welcome JS who just signed up for the course. So welcome JS. I'm going to put the link back in the chat as well, just so everybody has it. But where did that link go? Well, Abby's still here. Maybe Abby, will you drop the link in the chat? And Karis, is there anything you want to say before we wrap up and shift into going into a social session?
Sorry, I was muted. Just want to encourage people to hang out, because we did that last week a little bit spontaneously, and it was just so much fun. It was simple, and you don't need to be shy. Like we're kind of all not used to socializing, I think, since the past year. But as far as the program goes, for me, I feel like I'm realizing really how much of a beginner I am. When Giuliana was saying, think about mushrooms as birds and fungi as animals, right? That was like, oh man, I've just been using those two terms interchangeably. And so I learned something already tonight that I'll probably forget by tomorrow, that little detail, and start using them interchangeably again. But it's exciting. That kind of thing, I love that kind of knowledge. But I'm also really looking forward to class tomorrow for the people who are early birds, already jumped into the program with Elsa. That'll be tomorrow afternoon. And it will be available for anybody who's in the program afterwards, but I like to be live where we can ask questions of her tomorrow. And she's going to really go into some basic beginning about what a mushroom is, really the parts of the mushroom and what a mushroom is, as well as conservation issues. So that's a hot topic. So I'm excited. I'm ready to learn.
I love how you've rounded out the program, Karis, to include, these other guest teachers, to really add so much depth to and appreciation to the medicinal mushroom topic.
Yeah, and most of these guest teachers are new to me, so I'm really excited to learn about their work. And I've been interviewing them, and they're really fascinating, the work that they're doing. Like Todd Elliott is in Australia, and the work he's doing, studying marsupials and how marsupials interact with particular fungi, and because of the loss of these marsupials, then some fungi are endangered. So I don't know, it's pretty exciting.
I don't know Giuliana as well, but Elsa, I can just tell you, Elsa is an amazing researcher and lover of mushrooms, and I know you're really going to enjoy hearing her. She just knows so much. It's amazing.
Yeah, so if you are interested in studying mushrooms and you join before 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, you can come to that class live and save $50. So